Hello, and welcome to San Antonio Book Festival. I'm Lucy Podmore, librarian at Clark High School here in San Antonio, and I have the distinct honor of talking to and welcoming uh, Reneé Watson and Brittany Morris, two phenomenal YA authors. So let me just do a quick introduction to our guests who are here. Reneé Watson is a New York Times bestselling author. Her novel, Piecing Me Together, received a Newbery Honor and Coretta Scott King Award. Her books include Love is a Revolution, amazing, Ways to Make Sunshine, Some Places More Than Others, This Side of Home, also amazing, What Mama Left Me, Betty Before X, co-written with Ilyasah Shabazz, and Watch Us Rise, co-written with Ellen Hagen. I wrote this the other day. I will at one point stop talking about that book, but it won't be anytime soon. I love that book. As well as two acclaimed picture books, A Place Where Hurricanes Happen and Harlem's Little Blackbird, which was nominated for an NAACP Image Award. Reneé splits her time between Portland and New York City. So a big, fantastic San Antonio welcome to you, Reneé.
Thank you.
And we also have Brittany Morris, who is the author of Miles Morales' Wings of Fury, Slay, which blew me away. Slay, yes, I love that book. Lots of awards, lots of stickers on that book. Let's see, and The Cost of Knowing, which is her brand new book. Yes, there it is. Beautiful, beautiful book. And she's also written for video games, including Legend of Redwall. She is also the founder and former president of the Boston University Creative Writing Club. She holds a BA in economics, currently lives in Philly with her husband and beautiful brand new baby boy, who is adorable. And let me see, you can find her online at authorbrittnymorris.com and on Twitter or Instagram at Brittany Emma Morris. And a big San Antonio welcome to you, Brittany. And
Thank
Reneé,
you.
I don't have your Twitter information. I don't know why I didn't have it, but I believe it's, what is your Twitter and Instagram?
Twitter is Renee W. Author, and Instagram is Harlem Portland.
Harlem, Portland. All right. And so we'll put that in the chat. And definitely, y'all are amazing people to follow online. I get all kinds of stuff from you too. So before we get started with the actual questions, just some reminders for those of you who are joining us online. Our authors' books are available for purchase at Nowhere Bookshop, our newest indie bookstore here in San Antonio. We hope you will consider purchasing their books to support our independent bookstore. And we will have about 10 to 15 minutes at the end of our session for questions. If you have questions that pop in your head during this conversation, certainly type them up as they pop into your head, because I always forget my questions. If I think I'm going to remember at the end, there's 10 others that come in my mind. So type it up in the chat, and then we'll definitely get to those at the end. So let's go ahead and Reneé, let's start with your book. If you'll please just give us a little background on Love is a Revolution. Tell us what that book. I love that book.
Sure. So Love is a Revolution is about Nala, who is a Jamaican American girl. She lives in Harlem, and she's excited about summertime, and she has all these plans for summer. And she meets a guy, and his name is Ty, and she falls for him. He's very handsome and also very kind and thoughtful, and she enjoys being around him. He's also an activist, and she's nervous because she is not, and she's worried that maybe if she's not the kind of passionate community organizer activist that he is, that maybe he won't like her. So she tells a few lies to pretend that she's doing the work that he's doing also, and it kind of gets out of hand, and she has to come back to herself and realize, if I'm going to be in this relationship, I need to be honest, and first of all, if I'm going to love anyone else, I need to love myself. So it's a rom-com, but there's a lot about self-love and figuring out who you are before you can give yourself to someone.
Man, I love Nala. She was, I had a lot of fun with her in my head. I'm like, man, that sounds like me. Like she and I need to have a conversation. Okay, Brittany, let's go ahead and talk to us about The Cost of Knowing.
Yeah, so hi everyone, Brittany Morris, author of The Cost of Knowing. It is about two Black teenage brothers. One can see into the future and one can see into the past. And everything changes when the older brother sees a vision of his younger brother dying in the next couple of days. And so it becomes a race against time to get to the bottom of this 400-year-old family curse, and grapple with, anxiety about the future and intergenerational trauma from the past, and figure out what it means to be a joyful Black boy in the present. It features Black boys and men prioritizing their mental health and doing what's right for them amidst a world that's not the friendliest. So I'm very, very excited to share it with everyone. It came out
I
5 days ago now.
Yeah, on Tuesday, last Tuesday, and it's so beautiful. It's such a gorgeous book, and
Thank you.
I want to say it's a little hard for me to talk about it because I had lots of questions. I'm like, what? Hold on, wait a minute. And I knew things were going to go one way, and then so I was like, no. Anyway, I don't want to spoil anything. So I'm just going to qualify. This is real hard for me to talk to you right now about that book because it's so good, and I have lots of. I should have done that in the pre-chat. Anyway, okay. Let's see. So talk to us, and Renee, you can start first, but talk to us about how or when the idea for your book or the characters came to you, and did that original idea shift or evolve before you completed that novel, and then what caused that shift?
Sure. So I had just completed Watch Us Rise with Ellen Hagen, and that book is about two friends who are budding activists. They're very much pushing back against sexism and racism at their school. They're using poetry and the arts and theater to make change. And I was thinking, I know those girls in real life. I know young people who kind of already know who they are. They've found their voice. They're sharing their voice. And I also know girls like Nala who are figuring out how involved do they want to be in their community, and what does it mean to be an activist? Do they have to do the more big performative outward things, or can they be more quiet and still care, right? And so I wanted to explore a story where a girl is trying to figure it out. And so the initial idea was just, yeah, what about a girl who isn't quite the leader yet? And I wanted to have some fun as a writer myself. I write a lot about the intersections of race, class, and gender. And I just kind of needed a break from having some of the more heavy conversations. And so I wanted to also write something where a Black girl could fall in love and not have to carry kind of the burden of talking about race in that way that I have in other books like Piecing Me Together. So all of that was coming to me as I started the story, and I almost changed my mind. I was doing final revisions during last summer. We're in a pandemic. The Black Lives Matter movement was, in full effect last summer, and I was like, maybe I should not be writing a love story right now. And then I was like, no, love is real too, and our kids are also having joy, and I wanted to just lean into that joy. So I almost changed my mind. And then I kind of pushed myself to stick with Nala's story and let her just have a summer that's kind of carefree and fun and loving, because that is happening too.
I'm so glad you didn't change your mind. I mean, she's such a great character because, so many times the characters are, the characters we meet, they're these super polished characters, and they don't seem to make any mistakes or screw up a lot. And Nola makes all of
No,
the lover, and
it's very
she,
flawed.
you're like, yeah, and that's good. And because I feel like and this reminded me of from Watch Us Rise, where they do that poem about magazines, right? And how everything is projected as perfection to young girls and just young people, and I feel like they always have to have the right answer. They're afraid to speak up or speak out because if someone's going to say something or whatever, it's not the right thing to say. And so flawed characters, bring them on because I feel like our young people need to see the growth that happens, like, because there's no, you're not static at 17, right? Goodness, you've
Right.
got years to go.
Yeah.
Brittany, why don't you go ahead and answer that question? So how did this evolve? And I know yours did have an evolution.
Yeah, so it kind of evolved in two different ways. So the very first spark for The Cost of Knowing actually started with a character that I couldn't get out of my head. Usually my books start with a question. So with Slay, it was, what would happen if there was an all-black video game? And with The Cost of Knowing, it was just this random character who was a black young man who worked in a toothpaste factory, of all things. And I told my agent this, by the way, and she said, I am so glad we've evolved from there. And so he started in a toothpaste factory, and the idea was that as he moved the toothpaste down the line, the tubes, he would see where the toothpaste tube would end up and what the future would be. So it started as this like kind of satirical idea, and then it would get kind of deeper and kind of sad and kind of like, oh, I never knew there was so much story here. And so then I thought of, well, what if there was another character alongside this character who could see into the past? And then I got to thinking, well, if these characters are black, this kind of already feels like how we live every day. Especially with, like when Black History Month comes around every year, we remember the civil rights movement, and we remember slavery, we remember so many things that are so important to remember in our history books, but also that are hard to get through. Like there's emotional energy spent there remembering that. And holding that as we live our daily lives. And then we got, our people on TV with the Black Lives Matter movement and everything becoming hashtags, and there's this looming dread in the back of at least my head that says you could be next. This could have been you under the right circumstances, and that's also hard to carry. And so once I had the concept in my mind that we kind of already live sandwiched between the future and the past, and how hard it makes it to live in the present moment, I weighed that up against all of the talk that's going on with mental health and being present and meditating and creating space and doing self-care. And I wanted a book that was intersectional in that way for specifically Black young men, because I feel like they're often excluded from those talks and those spaces. Because it's great to say like, oh, it's sexy when men talk about their feelings, and, yay for men who cry and all this stuff. But that's a lot to ask from specifically Black men. And I feel like the world doesn't really understand why. So my goal with this book was to come alongside Black men and say, I will never understand your struggle firsthand as a Black woman, but I know it's different from, and I know you shouldn't have to bear it alone. So that was the idea.
Yeah, it's such a great way too, that when the revelation happens that his younger brother also has this gift or curse, right? And they kind of both, that was an interesting conversation that they had in the book. And when that happened in my head, I was like, oh, that is like if they could have just talked about this together, then things would have maybe easier to bear. I don't know if that's the right word, but you're not going through this alone. And I feel like, I feel like I've adopted this, I don't know, a couple of years ago, that bad communication is the like seed for all horrible things. like when people aren't talking to each other and aren't, being honest and truthful, like that's when it all goes haywire. And I don't know how to make sure that I'm communicating carefully and making sure that people around me that I know that are communicating carefully and just talking and letting out those feelings. There's never a reason why you should be suffering alone, right? Especially with your surrounding core, who will love you regardless. Okay, so let me kind of talk about that, then kind of leads into this next question. So both of your characters put on, and I use this term game face, but I don't really like that word. I just couldn't think of another word to use in there. I know y'all are going to come up with brilliant words for that. Game face for their interactions with their friends and family. And so my question is, how much of that for your characters was destructive or self-preservation?
I feel like for my main character, Alex, it was a little of both. He has these moments where, a big theme in the book is Alex's anxiety. He has generalized anxiety, like in real life. And so a lot of his thoughts are, spiraling, thinking of the same things over and over, thinking about what ifs and worrying. And so in his social interactions, a lot of times he's like, I don't have the energy to care about this. I don't have the energy to devote any more mental space.
Mhm.
He just says yes, or he just says okay, and he's like, let me, like, what's the quickest way I can get out of
Yeah,
this
get out.
without
Yeah.
having to like expend any more energy? Yeah.
Mhm.
So I think in most situations, he intends to preserve his own mental health by that, but in doing that, he's also not sharing his feelings and not, and not, offloading some of that weight, right? So he's kind of working against himself for a lot of the book, and he does grow, thank goodness, and learns just how beneficial that can be to have people that he can trust with that weight.
Yeah, Nala is, I feel the same. It's both. Like it just, it depends. And I think that's true for most of us, is that there are times when you need to maybe not say what you're thinking. And that's the best choice, right? And so she is always assessing, okay, I'm in this group and they're talking about something. And if I am the one that's opposing, this is going to become an argument and a debate, and I don't have the energy for that right now, or that I don't want to ruin this moment, so let me just be quiet. It's not worth it. I don't have to have the last word, kind of thing. And then there are times when she doesn't speak where she probably should have, and she doesn't tell her full truth, and she should have told the truth. So yeah, she's figuring out like when to use her voice and when not to, and what's a healthy boundaries. When do I need to be quiet to preserve myself and my sanity, and when do I need to speak up to say, hey, I'm here, I'm human, and you can't treat me that way. So she's going back and forth a little bit in the book to try to figure out what that is. And trying on in some ways different person, like her cousin who she lives with, is a bona fide activist, very just, she knows who she is, she's very sure of what she wants to do with her life, and she's very critical of Nala. She's even about recycling, about taking long showers. Like she is really really serious about her activism, and sometimes I think that makes Nala feel insecure, that she's not good enough and that what she does is wrong. So she's also trying to figure out, am I changing because I believe in this too, or am I just trying to not get into it with my cousin? And so she's trying to figure out, how can I be who I am at all times, but not offend other people by my actions. And I think that's something a lot of teenagers are, the pull with family expectations, friend expectations, and then who you want to be and how you want to show up in the world.
I think it's such a great point because, like you said, there's so many young people that are, this is what my group of friends think, but I can't, I don't know. I don't know that I'm 100% there with them. I'm kind of over here on it, but like I don't have anybody else to hang out with. So, I mean, it's hard for them to figure that out. And so it's nice to have a character. Yeah, I love her. It's just nice to have that character to go, you know what, this is who I am. And, I need to be honest with myself first, which is hard for adults to, to
Yes.
figure out.
Yes.
And so amazing that she gets that early. And I wish all of our children, our students could get to that point early, like finding that support group early, like they're not going to throw me out. My aunt isn't going to throw me out because I'm not exactly like her daughter.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really excellent conversation she had with her uncle too at that point. I mean, it's there's so many great things.
Can I
Okay,
say, can I
yeah,
add something? I think
sure.
too, it's important to also remember as adults and also as young people that it's okay to be complicated and for things to be more nuanced than yes or no, I believe
Right.
in this or I don't believe in that, right? So there's a scene where they're talking about the music that was playing at an event. And there were some problematic songs. All the activist kids are like, oh my goodness, I can't believe they played
Yeah.
those lyrics at this event. And Nala was like, that's my jam. What you talking about? I love
I
that
like that
song.
song.
And so they have this, debate and conversation around music and lyrics. And if you're a feminist, can you also listen to these lyrics and, all of that? And that maybe you don't know yet. And maybe you do like a song and you can also critique the lyrics, and you love a person and you can also critique them, and that's okay, that none of us are perfect, and there might not be a perfect situation, and it's okay to love imperfect people, and it's okay to be complicated and have nuance. And I wish that people had told me that as a young person. So I try to make sure that in books, characters are kind of exploring that kind of middle ground of issues and not so strong of one side or the other.
It's such a great, and you do such a great job of it too, because, you know, can you imagine only loving perfect people? Like nobody would be loved.
Be a lonely
Forget
world.
it. Right. Um, okay. So I'm going to kind of bounce this back to Renee, but really I want Brittany also to answer this. The summary on your book, Renee, mentions radical love, right? So it
Mhm.
mentions radical love. What does radical love mean to you? And what does radical self-love mean to you? And then Brittany, I'd like for you to answer that too, because I think your characters go through that as well.
So that term comes up in the book when the grandmother, she's fussing at Nala and her cousin Imani because they've just had this really horrible argument and they've both been disrespectful to each other. And so she's telling them, you know, you're thinking about activism, you're thinking about changing the world. The most radical thing you can do, you want to be radical, then the most radical thing you can do is love yourself and each other. And she's talking to them in this moment as two Black girls. And so I think when I think about radical love, I think about what sometimes the messages that girls get in general. Um, it's anti-love. It's like you're not enough, your skin tone, your hair texture, your body size. There's all these reasons why young women could not love themselves. So to love yourself in a world that is sometimes not so loving to you is a radical thing to do, to say, no, I like the body I'm in. I like my skin. And I'm not perfect, but it's okay to love my imperfections. Like all of that, I think is important. And then it's very radical to love other people and their flaws. And I'm not talking about physical things. I mean, like to have to be patient as someone is growing and to have to forgive and push other people to be their best. Like love is actually very complicated and it's not easy to do. It's a hard thing to do. So that act of love for self and others, I think is a radical thing. And it's kind of, you know, not what our culture teaches us. We are kind of taught to be about ourselves and me a lot. And so to think about, well, what does it really mean to be in community? Um, yeah, I think that's what I was thinking about in that moment in the scene and what I try to do in my life. I push myself to be a person who radically loves myself and other people.
Yeah. Brittany?
Renee, I want to take everything that you said and print it out and put it in a big old poster on the office wall.
True.
That was so refreshing to hear. Yeah, I think for Alex, radical self-love, the opposite for him has been being so preoccupied with duty and responsibility and what he thinks he's supposed to be doing and being a good son and being a good brother and being a man and defining what that means to him, that he hasn't stopped to think about what he needs. It's hard for him to see past, you know, his curse, which he calls it, and just, you know, every day he wakes up and he's like, I just got to get through today. I just got to make it. I just got to hustle. I just got to go to work. I got to go to school. I got to, you know, support my girlfriend and her single mother. And I got to do all this stuff because that's what, and it takes a while in the book for him to open up and say, I'm not okay. And here's why. And here's what I need. And this is the support that I need. And I mean, even down to there's a scene in the book where his aunt sits him down and says, you know, I just want to thank you for being such a good kid. Like she says, you know, when your parents died 4 years ago, I never expected to take on two nephews. And she says, you know, I want to congratulate you on becoming a man because you're so responsible and, you know, you take care of your little brother and everything. And at first, you know, maybe many of my readers read that and say, oh, you know, what a sweet compliment, what a nice gesture. And she's putting so much responsibility on him just by saying that. And I feel like I've heard that conversation and I've heard comments like that directed at Black men in my own life, including my nephews, who some of them are as young as 5. If they, you know, start crying for people in the family, say, oh, you know, you can't cry, you got to be a man. And just, I mean, the whole world is not very accommodating toward men expressing their feelings. And yet on social media, it's, you know, we hear a lot of that's what we want is for men to express their feelings. So This book is also a little bit of an outcry that our actions need to match our words. We need to facilitate that kind of thing and say that it's okay if they, can't handle something, or if they need help or space or support or whatever it is. So that's what radical self-love means to me, and specifically for Alex, is just saying what he needs, getting what he needs, prioritizing himself first over everything else.
Yeah, I mean, when she was expressing that gratitude for taking on so much responsibility, I'm like, but that shouldn't have to be like, then where's his help? Somebody should notice that his brother is just eating cereal and not talking to anybody, and is that weird to anybody else? Like, somebody needs to go up and go, okay, let's have a conversation. And the poor aunt or the brother, Alex is like, he's got his own things to work out, and there's a lot in that book. I love that book so much. Okay, so what do you think? This is for both of you. What do you think your readers can learn from Alex and Nala's struggle to be their authentic self? And what advice do you think Alex and Nala would give to young people reading this book?
I would say that I think you would be surprised how many people in your life will receive that you can't do it all. And that sometimes you have to say no, and that sometimes you need to ask for help. I know I was surprised. This has been a rough year for everybody. There was a point in 2020 where I was writing 2 books, writing 2 video games, writing an anthology entry, and what else was it? There's something else I can't even remember. I was doing so much. Oh yeah, I was pregnant.
I was going to say, I think you were about to have a child, but I didn't want to put your business out there. I was like, you were doing a lot. You were creating life.
Yeah,
I'm in the nursery and everything. I forgot. I was pregnant, by the way. So yeah, I was going through a lot, and my answer for the longest time was just to power through it and just sleep less and eat less and work more, and I was doing exactly the opposite of what my book was saying. So there was a point where I needed to take my own advice, and I had to really look at my workload and start saying, you know what, I can't take that extra thing on. I can't take this on. And at first it was just apology. And then I had to, work that out of my vocabulary and just say, you know what, I can't do it. I would love to, but can't. And I was so surprised people were like that. Yeah, people were receptive, and I mean, not everybody, but a lot of people, more people than I expected, were receptive, and it did wonders for my physical health, for my mental health, and I can't recommend people doing that enough.
Definitely.
Oh, wow. Nala, and what can people learn from her? I think Nala is, if anything, she's the quiet leader. So there's this big kind of contrast with her and Imani, where Imani, her cousin, is so outward with what she believes. She shows what she believes in big actions, which is great. And we need those people who are bold enough to get on stage and make the speeches, and who will, go to the rallies and protest and paint the murals and all the outward ways to protest and show up for what you believe in. Nala is going to her grandmother's kind of retirement home and building puzzles with the elderly friends that her grandmother has. And she's having these meaningful conversations and learning history and learning and figuring out who she wants to be by being in these conversations. She's taking photos and putting them in frames and giving them as gifts. Like, she's doing acts of kindness and showing up for people in her life, but in a very small way. And so I think one way that I hope young people resonate with the book and some takeaways is that it's okay if you're not the person on stage doing the big thing. You can show up for your neighbor, you can show up for a sibling, you can show up for yourself, and that all of that is important. And that sometimes I think we put a lot of pressure on young people to change the world. You are the generation that we are dependent on to take this to the next level and continue the work of your ancestors. And it's like, whoa, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah.
How about just change your world, not the world, but just like who are the people in your home or in your community? What are some small ways that you can go about loving people? And again, if we unpack love, being kind and patient and forgiving and thoughtful towards the folks that you care about, just start there and see the ripple effect that way. And I think, if anything, that's kind of the lesson that Nala is learning. And so I hope readers are kind of on that journey with her, figuring out in small ways how can they impact change.
I love it. Yeah, that's amazing. Um, Okay, so a few weeks ago, I asked both of you to select a passage from your books that you would like to read. And so could you go ahead and please share those with us now? And Brittany, we'll start with you.
All right. Yes, I can. So I'm going to start on page 7, paragraph 3, in case anyone's following along somewhere. So a little bit of backstory. Alex works in an ice cream shop and he struggles with generalized anxiety. So here we go. I hate working up front. Not because I don't like talking to customers. I'm actually pretty good at that part. And the customers are usually nice. They're mostly young parents with kids under 10 who are in and out in a few minutes. And the kids are almost always well behaved and happy while they're here because, hey, they're getting ice cream. Nah, I hate working up front because it means touching a million items with my bare hands. It's an anxiety minefield out there. Visions fly through my head with everything I touch, like one of those old school slide projector things. Every tap of the register screen, every dollar I count, every spoon I pick up, every hand I brush while giving out samples, every cup, every cone, every scoop. I can't focus on all of that and do my job. I can't constantly be thinking of what's going to happen and stay focused on what is happening. It's too much.
Tell me why you selected that one, that passage.
So I selected that one because I feel like that gives such an accurate portrayal of what one person's experience with anxiety might be. And just even something as simple as working a register can be a major struggle. And it's okay for you to admit that. Like Alex goes through a lot of this book struggling quietly, and all of that is going on in his head. And, you know, while he's staring a customer in the face and they think he's just, you know, calm and chill and just relaxing at work, like, no, there's a whole storm happening up here. So, yeah, it's okay to share your quiet struggle with people and let that out.
You know, I think that's a great part of your book, Brittany, because it gives people who don't suffer from anxiety a tiny little glimpse of what, you know, the emotional currency that is taking place every time, you know, we ask somebody who has whatever anxiety, social anxiety, you know, hey, let's go out somewhere, and they're like, I don't know, and you know, it's like, why do you always say no? Or, you know, we just get kind of angry because you don't know what is all the little things that they have to overcome in order to just hang out, you know. And it seems so simple to some of us, but you know, it's overwhelming, you know, for people who struggle with that. And when they don't speak about it, again, bad communication, right? Like that's what people are, the you know, the younger brother too. I mean, I don't know, maybe Alex doesn't reach out to his younger brother. He's like, I can't handle another problem. Like I can't have another problem to try and solve. So I like that book brings that aspect into it, right? And that it's a male character, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit too, because I think there's a lot of girls who are represented in books that have kind of issues like that, but boys are all, you know, perfect athletes, superstar, hero. So yeah, there's a lot going on. We're going to talk about that in a second. Okay, Renee, why don't you read your passage for us?
Sure. So Nala, throughout the book, she learns about this singer named Blue, who I made up, and she loves her songs, and her songs kind of become a mentor to her. She's getting all these messages about self-love through the singer Blue. And so the first draft, we didn't have any of the song lyrics in them. I just talked about the singer that she likes. But as I was revising, my editor encouraged me, why don't you write some of the songs so that the readers can see what Nala is hearing. So I'm going to read one of the songs, and it is called All I Need. All I need. Today I am possible. I have survived and will survive, and all that is coming is already mine. Not waiting on someone to want me, need me, No fairy tale dreams of what my life might be. I love me right now. Right now, I love me. And even with my flaws, I am enough. And I have failed, but I am not a failure. And love is patient, and love is kind, and love is not just for me to give away. Keep some for myself. Not waiting on someone to want me, need me. No fairy tale dreams of what my life might be. I love me right now. Right now, I love me. Today, I am possible. I have survived and will survive, and all that is coming is already mine. Today, I am my own revolution.
Okay, there's a little hearts fluttering from my heart right now. You're so incredible and talented, and
Oh,
listening to you read is
thank
even better.
you.
I
But
was
tell
gonna
us why
say
you
I'm running out of space on my wall, Renee.
it's true. It's
You are
true.
too
Take a
kind.
look. Plaster it
Thank you.
everywhere. I mean, she's amazing. She's absolutely amazing. So tell us why you chose that section, if only to make us
That's
cry.
a moment for Nala where she's really, really understanding that it's okay to be flawed, but she's not a failure. And that she really has to love herself. She's not waiting on someone to love her. She can love herself and be whole before any kind of romantic relationship. And also, any relationship, friends, her and her mom have a very complicated relationship, which is why she lives with her aunt. And so she's just coming to that, like, it's okay moment. And, yeah, it's one of the songs that once I wrote it, I kind of felt like, oh, like I felt better as the person writing the book. And I felt good for Nala that she had these lyrics to kind of lean into and learn from. So, yeah, I just thought it was relevant to our conversation about radical love, healing love, love being hard.
I love it. It's incredible. And I really like the point that you brought up where she's got to focus on herself before her romantic relationship. And I feel like Alex kind of comes to that same conclusion with Talia. Like, she kind of putting a little pressure on him there in that way. And, for their relationship to progress a little bit more and for him to be brave enough to say, you know what, look, I'm not ready. I'm not ready for that next step. And that's hard for teenagers to say, but I can imagine it would be harder for boys to say that, unless you trust that person implicitly. Like they're not going to say, well, I tried this and he's, whatever, he's not, whatever that means to boys. And it's, how hard was that for you to write, Brittany? Um, that scene, was it hard at all, or we're going to talk about boys, but go ahead and answer that question. Was that a hard piece to write?
Actually, no. So, Alex's sexuality is discussed in the book, and for me personally, I'm demi, and so my relationship with sex is very emotional, it's very intimate, and all of that. And I mean, there are boys and men out there who are just the same. So stacked that up against the societal pressure to be this often hypersexual being and, I mean, even to the point where Talia is, it, this isn't, I don't think this is said explicitly in the book, but it's implied. Talia is like, I didn't want to, oh wait, she does say it. What's wrong with me? She does say it in the book. She says, I didn't want to be, the person who can't keep up with her boyfriend and the person who, isn't ready and the person who's, dragging them behind. She wanted to be front and center, like, okay, I'm a good girlfriend. I'm ready to go. Like, I'm ready to be intimate. And Alex is like, wait a minute, I'm not, and I don't know how to say it because that's not what men do. And so it's they both grossly misunderstood each other thanks to toxic masculinity.
Yep.
And I could totally see a situation happening like that in real life. And
Yes.
in the book, no spoilers, but they resolved that issue thanks to good communication. So, but I could see it going totally south in the real world. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I related to that a little bit, just being demi and having a different relationship with sex than a lot of people. So,
Mm-hmm. What was this book um, challenging to write, or did it? When you were pregnant with your son, so you have a son now, and so how did that affect the way your story took place, or did it?
That's a great question. So Alex goes through a lot. And it was already it was pretty cathartic to write the first draft, I'm not gonna lie. I had a lot of feelings just about blackness that I needed to get down on paper. And Alex and Isaiah both go through so much in the book. And then I got pregnant, and then it was time to edit. And we in the midst of editing, we found out it was gonna be a boy. So my instantly I was in this situation where I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be raising somebody who can kind of relate to my main character who I just put through all this stuff.
Right.
And, I was editing this book and just thinking about, meeting my son and how I'm going to raise him and how I'm going to raise him to be joyful. And even in those first few weeks, like seeing him smile up at me and just, I mean, I can't describe that feeling. Just, it's the best thing in the world. And just wanting to preserve that and wanting to see him do that at 45 and be that joyful despite everything going on in the world. If I could have one wish. So it did change things as I was looking at this book. I looked at it differently. I said, thank goodness I wrote this before I became a mom, because I don't know if my heart could have taken the weight of this book. It took a lot out of me. It really, really did.
I love that you have vulnerable, real boys. And I mean, I know the characters that you have written about. I know boys like that. And I think sometimes, I don't know where the disconnect is sometimes in literature and in movies, TV shows. Like there's all these very super hyper masculine guys, but my nephews and my brother, the men in my church, I just know so many men who do cry and do share their emotions and love hard and are, processing a lot and are tender. And so I love that that's on the page. And I was thinking about for Nala, I didn't want it to be a surprise to her that Ty liked her and respected her. He's not the first guy she's met that likes her or that is a responsible guy. Her uncle is there. She has men in the neighborhood, elderly, there are several men. There's not like these exceptions to a rule. I think there really are a lot of guys who are like that, and they don't get a lot of space on the page. So I love that you have created that in your book. I think it's super important.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important for guys to read, but also, like you said, for the girls to read, because it's not, we have this ideal, and I don't know where it, like, why is this the ideal boy or man to look up to, and where, I don't know. There's a lot of messed up messaging, I guess. Again, bad communication. It's I had this question, Brittany, and it's kind of following into this. Your book features two brothers learning to love each other. And so why did you choose to focus on brothers? But also, and this is kind of a question that I had earlier, but it fits in right now. Do you think society as a whole, and both of us, I mean, all three of us, I think, agree to this. Do you think society as a whole needs to be more accepting of boys or men expressing kind or caring emotions, or is it boys needing to learn that? And maybe that's a marriage thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how we can expect boys to teach themselves that kind of thing. I think unless they're in an environment that fosters that, it's next to impossible to think that's okay. So I guess I answered your second question first. First one was, remind me. Oh, the brothers thing.
Focus on brothers.
Yes. So I have a little brother. There's actually a lot of references to my family in this book that are just kind of like, my family reading this would say, hey, I know what that means. I know what that means. It would take me a whole hour to go into all of them. But one of them is, I have a little brother. He's not 12, he's in his 20s. But we both went through a pretty traumatic childhood. We lived in an abusive home, and I watched him kind of retreat into himself and, kind of internalize his own struggle and go into a shell and just kind of shut down emotionally. And I didn't realize there was a problem at that time because I was a kid myself. He also has quite a bit of a food phobia, much like Isaiah does. And I just thought it was really, really important to talk about all of the different ways that trauma can manifest itself, even in terms of like eating habits and, um, you know, social anxiety and just generalized anxiety and depression and, having no energy and just, I mean, there's so many different ways that it can show up. And oftentimes people don't know what to look for. So that was really, really important for me to get that onto the page. And then with the relationship between Alex and Isaiah specifically, I feel like brotherhood in the Black community is, um, I don't want to say undervalued because I think we value it quite a bit, but it's not nurtured, especially expressing like physical affection among men in the Black community. So things like that are really important. I also wanted to show how differently Alex and Isaiah interpret what uh, the ideas of masculinity that are in their family, that were passed down through generations, the different interpretations that they have of it, and bounce ideas off of each other. So those are all the reasons why I thought brotherhood should be at the front and center of the story.
It's such a great book because it does have, with his brother's ability to look back in time and kind of go, oh, do you know this is why grandpa did this, or or oh, our great grandfather or whatever did this. It's a really great way to look at family history, right? And realize how you got where you are. And as much as we think things have changed, a lot of stuff hasn't. And so it's really, I mean, it's such a, both of y'all's books, I can't stop honestly talking about them at school. Anybody who comes up to me like, oh, you need this book. Let me just just trust me on this one. I just don't even tell them to hear this one. This one is really good. Let's talk a little bit about family in your book. So both of your books feature aunts as the primary caregiver. Was that why did you decide to feature that specific relationship? And I'll just stop there. I'll follow up with something in a little bit.
I I grew up with many friends who had different family structures, and so I want to, as much as I can in my books, reflect reality. And so I know not everyone lives with their parents, and that also doesn't mean that there's something significantly wrong with the parent child relationship, right? So Nala doesn't live with her mom, but she has a relationship with her, and there's no heavy, deep story about, oh, she was taken away because of all these horrible reasons. Like she was not good at loving Nala the way Nala needed to be loved. But she does love her, and yeah. So I just wanted to show the things that I've seen and the realities that I know exist, so that more and more young people can see themselves in books. Like, oh, right, my family structure is represented in this text. So I think I was just thinking about that and what is it to make a family. She doesn't have siblings, but she has this cousin who's like a sister and a best friend, and so just thinking about the ways in which when you don't have maybe what you need, you create it and you can figure out how to make family if the one that you were born into isn't quite healthy enough or fulfilling the needs that you have.
I like how Brittany, I'm going to let you answer that in a second, but I like Renee how in her relationship with her mom, it's like you said, it's not a big deal. It's not made to be a big deal in the book, right? Like this was a better situation for her with her aunt, and her aunt and her uncle were very welcoming to her, and the cousin sister sort of love kind of irritating thing, like it just all it blends together, like her family. It's an extended family that that took her in, that becomes, it's just like one big family. And I like that her mom doesn't like abandon her or leave her. I mean, she's still there. She's just I think I don't know if it was her grandmother who said, she couldn't love you in the right way, or they made that kind of comment about her mom.
Yeah, she's not good at loving, and that sometimes people can't love you the way you need them to.
Right.
Yeah. And women, I feel like I just also know that, Nala has a lot of women in her life by way of her grandmother, her aunt that she lives with, but then the other aunt that is like the, wealthy She's throwing all the big parties and things.
Right.
So she just has a lot of women to look up to. And I grew up that way. I mean, I love my mom, and I did live with her. She raised me. And I also had her siblings and my older sisters and the women at my church. And I always say the community raised me. And so in so many ways, Nala is being raised by a whole community of people. And I just think I think that's a lot of people's experience, but especially the Black community. We just like, you're my child, even if you're not my child. I'm gonna tell you what to
Yeah.
do, and I'm gonna, tell that boy to quit messing with you, and all that kind of
Right.
stuff is what I was getting at in this little Harlem community.
Nice. Brittany, what about you?
Yeah, so whenever I'm writing a new book, I'm a fast drafter, so my goal is to like speed through the first draft as fast as possible before I can overthink things because I'm way too good at that. Um, and so I only give myself 24 hours to outline. So Aunt Mackie being Aunt Mackie she was just thrown into the story at first. I knew in Slay, Kira's parents, she has a dad and mom. And so they have like, a pretty traditional family structure. And I knew I wanted this to be different. And I thought, as I edited and really interrogated my choices, I thought having Aunt Mackie be an aunt made a lot of sense. I knew if I made it so that it was Uncle Mackie, Alex would have had a Black male figure in his life that's like right there living in the same house that can give him input into what it means to be a Black man. But I knew if he was the only one, then that might directly translate into Alex and Isaiah's experience, and they would have, cues to go off of, and they would have behavior to emulate. And I really wanted to just isolate the two of them from any Black male figures in their life so that they could interrogate what it means for them and bounce ideas off each other and talk about their history and really look at their father and grandfather and their relationships with masculinity. And so that was really the idea behind it. Because their curse in the family runs only in the men. And so it made a lot of sense to make her an aunt.
I like how they kind of draw in through the history of their ancestors and their male ancestors, and it's almost like I feel like their male ancestors were kind of inching them along to discover this love and like it can be different, right? Like it doesn't there are things that you can do to change and I'll stop there because I don't want to say anything. I don't want to say anything else. Okay. All right. Who were the storytellers in your life when you were a child, and who encouraged you to engage and cultivate your creativity?
I had so many people in my life that fostered creativity. I guess it started with my parents. They tell me, I don't remember this at all, but they tell me every night they had to read no less than 9 books to me each night, and I would apparently count and be like, "You stopped at 8. Where's my 9th book?"
I did one more. Well, a little
Magic number
Alex
9.
is coming on with that soon.
Oh,
your
I
parents are gonna be telling him that story.
I told myself I wouldn't, but I've already filled up his bookshelf, and I'm like,
Oh
"Oh, God." So yeah, they would just read and read and read and read and read to me when I was little. I remember because I was bullied in elementary school, one of the safest places I knew I could go was the library. And it could just be me and a book, or me and a notebook, or me and a blank sheet of paper, and it was just a way for me to just clear my mind, and I could be at peace. And I remember public library. I remember it was just the most magical place. I loved how it smelled. I loved all the books. I loved, looking at the big books. I had no idea they were encyclopedias. It's not my favorite thing to read, but they just looked so, big and important. And I just remember it was some of the most exciting times of my life, and story time was like it. I mean, I could live in that room. So yeah, I had a lot of examples. And then my 4th grade teacher is the person who really, first told me, you could write professionally one day, right? That's a thing people do. I just didn't know. So yeah, I had a lot of people pushing me toward becoming a writer one day. I should have seen it coming, because it's the only thing that I do where it doesn't feel like I should be doing something else.
Oh, that's nice. It's a good feeling.
Besides
Yeah,
motherhood.
lovely.
Yeah, well, there's that thing. There's that little guy who needs to be fed and, bathed every once in a while. Renee, what about you?
So same. I was an avid reader as a child. My mother read to me. There were books all over the house. She modeled reading, so I would see her reading and marking up the text. Like she read her Bible and would mark up, highlight scriptures, and so I just always grew up having an appreciation for words. And we were a family of storytellers. Like the dinner table was not quiet in my home. We would sit and it was also the how was your day stories, and then go into what happened at school, but also the stories of our family and how we moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, how we got to Oregon, like all of the family history was just constantly being exchanged from. And then when the extended family gets together, the uncles and aunts and my grandparents would be talking about, when they were young and this and that. So I just grew up, I feel, in a family of storytellers. Where it was dramatic, like they were going to act it out, do different voices. It just was a big deal. And I would be in awe just listening at all these stories and learning about my mother and her childhood. And then reading. I read a lot of poetry as a kid and really gravitated to that. And so, yeah, all through school, just kind of was always writing and reading. I don't know that I mean, I didn't know how to articulate this as a kid, but I think when I look back on those years, a lot was happening in Portland. I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s. There was a lot of skinhead violence and very, very scary things happening. And I didn't know how to process that. So I wrote a lot of poems. I wrote a lot in my journal, and it just became a safe space for me to kind of process what was happening in the world. And so I think I don't know what, like almost like Brittany. I mean, it's so in me to tell stories that even if I wasn't doing this for a living, I would still be writing. And I've always felt like a writer even before I became a published author. That was just something, no matter what job I've had, I have always also been writing on the side.
It's amazing, and I'm so glad both of you decided to make this your career, because certainly your voices and your characters are ones that young people and adults who are around young people need to hear and to read and to watch and to listen to, so that we can then discuss with our young people that are around us. Look at the way these characters are dealing with whatever it is that they're dealing with in their book. So thank you so much for your work. It's definitely needed, and it's certainly a breath of fresh air. And Brittany, Slay blew my mind when I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. The powers that they have in the I think what was
So
it when
good.
one of the cards, it's like the dreads going around and around, or braids that are going round and round. That's like one of the powers. It's like, God, this is brilliant. It's so much fun. It's such a fun book to read. Um,
Thank you.
so I mean, amazing. And then Renee, I'll embarrass myself gushing about your book, so I'll try not to. They're so good. Okay, so besides each other and yourselves, who are some authors young people need to read today? And who do you think, which authors are challenging the thinking of young people?
Hmm.
Mm.
I love Lamar Giles I love Not So Pure and Simple is one of my
Yes.
favorite more recent books of his. It's speaking of how boys are represented in
Yep.
books and the whole idea of virginity and sex and love and relationships. It is so so good. The
Yep.
audiobook is amazing as well. Brandy Colbert, Liara Tamani. There's a lot of writers who I am excited about and who I want young people to know about. And of course, like some legendary folks like Nikki Grimes. Just feel like anything she writes, people should be reading.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, I'll stop there.
So many. The first person that comes to my mind is Nick Stone. I flew through Dear Martin in 4 hours. I've never read a book that fast. It was so, so good. I could wax poetic about that book all day. Julian Winters, one of my favorite people on Twitter. He's amazing. Love his words. I mean, there's Angie Thomas, the Titan of YA. I just finished reading Concrete Rose, and it was just so sweet. I loved it.
I'm
um,
so happy she took up Maverick's story because I fell
Me
in love with
too.
Maverick.
Such a
The Hate You
brilliant
Give. I'm like,
idea.
Yep.
yeah. Like, what's his story? And then fell in love with him even more in Concrete Rose. I'm like, God, this guy is so great. I mean,
Yeah.
that another. Sorry, I'll
Yeah.
stop.
And I mean, that's another great book about a young black man trying to be a man too soon because he feels like the world, has put that responsibility on him. Just beautifully, beautifully done. N.K. Jemisin is another one. Not YA. She writes adults, but the Broken Earth trilogy. I mean, the first book blew my mind. The fifth season. So I recommend all of those people.
Definitely. All right, ladies. Well, our time is up, but I could sit and talk with you, both of you, for hours, and I hope one day you make it to San Antonio, and I'll find you and we'll talk for hours, even if you don't want to. You'll be too nice if we know. So thank you so much. It was a wonderful chat with you. I hope you have a lovely rest of the afternoon, evening, and great week. And I hope to see you very, very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting.
Of
Bye.
course.
Bye.